Welcome to the Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Radio Show. Listen in nationwide on the Tan Talk and Starcom radio networks with your host, Lori Zook, the consumer champion. Each week, we'll be discussing problems and solutions, changing negatives to positives, and helping you, the consumer, to learn something new. Get smarter faster and avoid scams and fraud. All opinions are that of the host and guests, and all shows are for educational purposes only and not to be construed as legal advice. Here's your host, Lori Zook.
Welcome to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. I'm your host, Lori Zook, and each week we'll be discussing problems and solutions, changing negatives to positives, and helping you, the consumer, to get smarter faster. My guest today is Breque from Bayshore Home Care, and we're going to be talking about what you as a consumer need to know about home care. This is kind of a tough or an emotional subject, I think. I want to welcome you to the show, Breque, and share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Lori. I am a University of North Florida graduate, so now I've been in the Tampa area for about 2 years. And I'm currently working on my master's in business at the University of South Florida. Go Bulls. And at Bayshore, my role really consists of helping to educate seniors and their families, as well as healthcare professionals, about options in senior care and just really informing them so that they have all the information they need to make a good decision when it comes to senior care.
Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit, how do you know when it's time for help at home? Mm-hmm. Give me some basics. People call you up and say, what do I do?
All the time. This is really one of the toughest points, is like, when is the tipping point to where it's time for help for mom? She, can't really function all the way by herself. So what I really suggest is just paying a visit to the home and taking a look around. The things you're going to look for, open up the refrigerator. Check the food in there. Is it old? Is it moldy? Is there any food in the fridge or the freezer in the first place? So things like that. And then also look for clutter around the house. And you kind of know, what your mom and dad's habits are anyway. So are they a little bit more cluttered than others, or are they really neat? And just kind of changes in behavior like that. If things are more cluttered than they usually are.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I have a family member who in another state, who lives in a state of what I call hoarding.
Yes.
Okay. Severe, tremendous hoarding. Mm-hmm. He can barely make it up and down the steps. Yeah. The condition of the house is poor at best. Mm-hmm. And family members have tried to talk him into not living in a 2-story house because he has issues where he can't even get up and down the steps. So I'm sure it's probably a common thing that you hear.
Yeah.
What do you tell family members? What do you do with a person that you love, that you don't want them to be in that situation?
Well, a lot of times, you have to assess what is safe for someone to live in. And a lot of times it's hard for, aging family members to take advice from their children. Right. There's kind of that whole role where I'm the parent, you're the child, you can't tell me what to do. So a lot of times we would suggest, honestly, getting in a professional in that situation, ask someone who knows about hoarding to come out and just take a look and maybe have a conversation with that loved one. Even though it's going to be hard, it might not stick the first time, but that kind of is usually one of the best starting points if you can't get through to your loved one yourself.
Right. And I would think also, for elderly people, sometimes they go through dementia. Their mind is not completely there, but I would think it's difficult to try and get them out for some type of, they don't want to leave the house.
Right.
This is their house. They've lived there for years and years, and now you're coming in, and in reality, the roles have kind of reversed, right? The children become the parents.
Absolutely.
And the parents become the children.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the good thing with that is, even though they don't want to leave their home, a lot of these professionals, if not all of them, will come to you. And a lot of times they want to see that home environment. So they want to see that senior in their home, what does it really look like, and get that picture for themselves so they can make good recommendations. They wouldn't really want to bring them out of that environment either. So,
gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So how do you find a good assisted or independent living facility if living at home is not an option?
Yes. So the blessing and the curse is that there are so many different types of assisted and independent livings. There are more home-like facilities that just have maybe 5 or 6 beds, and then there are other more resort, or you feel like you're living on a cruise ship places that have, hundreds of rooms. So I would really suggest first making visits to these places. And you'll want to ask, find out what their kind of activities are. You can always sit, and they usually have lunch tours, so you can go and have lunch and see what the facility is all about, because the most important thing is making the right move first to have a successful transition. So you'll want to see, are the people that live there, are they kind of similar to you? Kind of like, if you're choosing a sorority or something, you want to pick one that you fit.
You want the right group.
So you want people that kind of have common interests. A lot of, retirement communities, they have activities all the time. So are the activities things that you or your loved one would be interested in doing? And then also, the age group of the people, kind of their mobility, just that's usually what makes people be the happiest, is when they're around others that are like them. But I definitely suggest taking those tours and making the visits, even go more than once. There are times you could be there on a fluke. It could be a really bad day when you come the first time, and then, great the next. So go more than once, and definitely don't go alone. Have another set of eyes, someone else to absorb what's going on with you. And then you can kind of debrief and make sure that the picture you have in your head is, accurate before you make any decisions.
That's a good idea. Now, can you explain what is the difference between assisted living and independent living facilities?
So with independent living facilities, the facility isn't really licensed to provide any hands-on care to your loved one. It's really kind of just like an apartment with other people of the similar age there. But a lot of times with independent living, they also have an assisted living side to them. So a lot of times it's half and half. So as you progress and need more help, then you can move into the assisted living side. So with assisted living, there's a standard license that allows them to provide hands-on care to people. And then there are also 3 other levels of licensure they can get to provide different levels of care. So depending on, diagnoses and things like that.
Right, what they need. Okay. Now, when and why should you consult an elder law attorney?
Well, the answer to this is really like yesterday. You should consult an elder law attorney.
Because most people wait till it's too late, right?
Oh, of course, always. Because they are so helpful with getting just things in place ahead of time. So it's, a healthcare surrogate. So who would you want to make healthcare decisions for you if you weren't able to? A power of attorney, if anything were to happen, you need someone responsible to be able to make those decisions for you. So really, this is about empowering the senior to take some initiative before something happens. And it is a blessing for your family as well, because they are able to come into a situation, they're already informed, they know what you as the senior want to happen as you age. And it takes a lot of guilt and pressure off their shoulders, knowing, what your wishes are in advance.
Right.
So,
and unfortunately, I think a lot of people wait, though, until the last minute. Now, what happens if you don't have a healthcare surrogate or somebody make decisions and now you're in bad shape? What happens?
Yeah. A lot of times, the family is brought in and consulted for those decisions. It's just a lot easier if you have the proper documents in place ahead of time. It's a little less sticky. Things go a little more smoothly that way.
Right.
So,
that sounds like an important one to
yeah.
me. And now, what does insurance or Medicare cover when it comes to home care?
Yes.
What's the difference between skilled home healthcare and private duty?
So skilled home health care is what is paid for by Medicare or some of your other insurance companies like United or Humana. And what that is, it's prescribed by your doctor, so they write an order for it. And this covers physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy, or all 3 if that's what you need. And this allows for someone to come out to your home a couple of times a week for maybe a month or 2, just depending on your diagnosis. And they'll help you for periods of 1 hour at a time, like in 1 hour increments. So it's really just short-term, like rehab help. It's not really any kind of long-term care plan, the skilled home health. But then the private duty home health is just paid for either by long-term care insurance or private pay. And this is more a long-term care plan. And there is actually 3 different types of private duty home care. So you'll need to know that as well going in. So you can have a fully licensed agency, a nurse registry, or a companion agency. So the types of things that they can help with and their licensure are all different. But they help with more day-to-day tasks and just ongoing living at home safely.
So there's basically a different menu of options depending upon what the person needs and what their health insurance may cover or may not cover, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what happens, like in the case of the company you work for, and I'm assuming most reputable companies, are there background checks done on caregivers? And what's the hiring process for a caregiver? Because how do you make sure that you're getting somebody that is not, an ex-felon or has done something terrible? How do you know you have a good person?
Right. Well, the regulations are different based on what type of agency you go with. So a fully licensed agency, which is what Bayshore is, has the highest level of licensure. So they are kind of held to the highest standard of regulations for the care that they give, the people they hire, and everything. So at Bayshore, we perform a level 2 background check on all of our caregivers, as well as competency checks to make sure that they are actually able to perform the care that needs to be happening with the clients. So we are not going to send somebody out that isn't able to help someone go from a seated to a standing position or anything like that. So those are a couple of the things, as well as some agencies will interview each caregiver that comes in and applies, like as you would expect. But a lot of agencies actually don't interview the caregivers, which is sort of scary if you think about it.
That is scary.
Yes. So a good company will they have to perform that level 2 background check, but they'll go another step and perform the interviews and just some extra kind of background information.
So a level 2, so it sounds like a level 2 background check is something that's more thorough than a different background check, correct?
So that it's a state and national fingerprint-based system, and it checks for anybody that is going to be in a trusting position. So to give care in a trusting position, you have to have a level 2 background check performed if you are working for an agency.
Right, because I would think if somebody comes to my house, I would want to make sure that not only they're going to help me, but they're not going to steal my possessions.
Exactly.
Is my thought, you know?
Exactly. And that kind of is the danger of hiring just a private companion per se. Someone oh, my neighbor, she can come over and help me with this. She helped my other friend before. That's kind of where things usually get tricky, is when there aren't those background checks performed. And then as well as when you go through an agency, you have another layer of protection with the liability insurance and the workers' comp insurance. So
right, and that would concern me because if you have somebody, a friend come over and they get hurt, now they can sue you because they got hurt on your property while they're helping you, correct?
Yes, and that's true for 2 of the 3 types of private duty home care.
Okay.
So the only one that you are really necessarily definitely covered with is a fully licensed home health agency. With a nurse registry or a companion agency, it really depends. So you'll want to ask those questions.
Great. Now, at Bayshore, is there a contract for services or is there a minimum quota of service per week? How does that work? Got about a minute before break.
Sure. At Bayshore, we have a very low minimum number of hours, which is just we require 1 hour of service once a week or 4 hours a month, however you'd like it. Really, the general industry going rate is that you would need a 4-hour block of service a couple of times a week. And at Bayshore, we don't require a contract for services, but some agencies do say, you need to use us for 6 months or a year, or, you pay a fee to break the contract. But at Bayshore, we don't use those. Okay,
so it sounds like you offer something that's more flexible than 4 hours twice a week, that type of thing.
Sometimes that's not what you need. Sometimes you just need a little help to keep going. So.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue talking about this. Stay with us.
I thank you all, but it's been no bed of roses. No pleasure cruise.
Tarpon Springs High School football is on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Tune in Friday nights to hear all the hits and excitement of high school football. Join play-by-play man Rick Sassone every Friday night, bringing you the action of Spongers football. Pre-game starts at 7:05, and the game action starts at 7:30. Tune in Friday nights here on Tan Talk 1340 so you don't miss a snap. Tarpon Springs High School football is on Tan Talk 1340 Friday nights, so get in the game.
I consider it a challenge before the whole human race, and I ain't gonna lose.
And welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk Radio Show. I've been speaking with my guest, Breque Bonner from Bayshore Home Care, and we're talking about, how do you know when it's time for help at home for one of your loved ones? Now, Breque, in the case of schedules, you can talk about your company, Bayshore, but you can talk about other companies if you know as well. What happens if you want to change your care schedule?
Yes, this is a great question, and it's something you definitely want to ask up front before you make any commitments. Chances are that if you need to make a change on your schedule, you're not really going to know very far in advance.
Right.
It's going to be kind of a short notice thing, and a lot of times when you're first getting started with home care, you might not really know the care that your loved one needs. So you might go in and be like, oh, I think I might want 5 hours a day. And then, 2 weeks later, you're like, well, this is way too much. I need to scale back. So that's something you need to ask. At Bayshore, we have, constant contact with our family members and our clients. They can call in to us 24 hours a day and make any kind of changes for their care that they would like. So if someone's not feeling well, this happens all the time. I'm not feeling well. Can you come bring me to the doctor and then come stay the night with me because I don't really want to be at home alone overnight. Because Bayshore has been around so long, we have 250 caregivers. We're able to get that staffed very quickly and have someone out there for you. So that's something you want to ask, how many caregivers do you have? That'll give you an idea of how quickly they're able to react to changes in the schedule that you might want to have as well. So this can also happen if you have a change in diagnosis, you found out a new health problem that you might have, or, something happens to one of your friends and you're just concerned and you want to change your schedule. It's really important.
So a caregiver, they'll come to the house and will they drive the person to appointments or they'll stay with the person? They pretty much take care of that person for whatever the designated amount of time is, correct?
Yeah.
And now if they don't have insurance, is it something that they can pay out of pocket? I'm assuming they can pay out of pocket for if insurance doesn't cover it?
Are you speaking about the transportation or the services altogether?
Services altogether.
Yep. So for private duty home care, it's really always paid for out of pocket or with a long-term care insurance policy. Those are really the two main things. So
okay.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? If I hire a company that's going to do this, that's going to check on a family member, maybe they're not in this state, and I want to get updates. How do I know what is going on? Because my loved one might not really be communicating with me too well.
Right, exactly. This happens all the time. So a lot of times with home care agencies, the first call really comes from that adult son or daughter. It doesn't come from the senior in the first place. So because of HIPAA, which is a patient privacy law, we would have to get a form signed that says, I, Mrs. Jones, say that it's okay that you talk to my daughter about my condition.
Almost like a power of attorney.
Exactly.
Okay.
But, that's all it says, that it's okay for us to communicate. So once we have that form signed, the agency should really be able to update you as often as you want. So for Bayshore, a lot of times we have, adult family members that say, can you call me every Friday and let me know how the week went? Or they want to call once every other week or once a month, or, maybe they can email you an update, whatever you want. And then, of course, they should always say, we will give you an update immediately should anything, any emergency happen or any, crazy changes happen, while we're at the shift. So a lot of times, you should be able to have an update as often as you'd like.
Right. So. Gotcha. Okay. Now, I noticed when I looked at your website, you had different things listed. For example, you list something called an independence membership. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it works?
Yeah. An independence membership, that's just something Bayshore offers, so it's not really an industry standard service. But this is really designed for the senior who might not really need hands-on care, so help with, bathing and dressing, things like that, but their loved ones or they themselves are a little bit concerned about what might happen, down the road. So it's really a preventative measure. So with this, you have Bayshore in your back pocket, should anything change, but what you really get is an upfront, many assessments and evaluations, so like wellness assessments, home safety check, we can go over your healthcare goals and kind of where you are now. And then the follow-up months to that would be our consumer advocacy team checking in with you and, developing and implementing the plan to help you stay on track with your goals and monitor your progress of how things are really going overall.
Okay, now the caregivers that come to the house, I know you said they're licensed. Are they nurses? Are they not nurses? What kinds of people come out and do these assessments?
So for the assessment, that would be our client advocate team, so which would be either an LPN or an RN. those are the ones who go out and do the assessments, but then who comes out and actually performs care if you want private duty services are, they're called certified nursing assistants or CNAs or home health aides, HHAs. And these people go through a training process, and learn all about giving care in the home, and they have to, practice on dummies and learn all these techniques and everything. And really the only main difference between the CNA and the home health aide is where they are kind of specialized at giving the care. So a CNA is more for a facility or a hospital setting, and then the home health aide is more specialized to give care in a home. But that's really the only difference between the two. But they're all licensed by the state and, have to take tests and everything like that.
Okay, gotcha. Now, talk a little bit about companionship and homemaking services and what that means. That's a different service, because I'm assuming different companies have different menu options, so to speak. So this is your menu option.
Sure. So some agencies are only licensed to provide companion care. And so companions can help you with things like running errands, making a meal, going to the grocery store, just being there for socialization.
They're almost like your legs.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just like a little friend, there next to you. But they aren't able to provide any hands-on care. So if you need help, getting out of bed in the morning, or you need help getting dressed in the morning or anything like that, they are not licensed to be able to provide that kind of care to you. That is when you would move into a home health aide service. So the home health aides, they can provide everything that the companions can provide. So as far as the meal preparation and the grocery shopping, all of that, but they can also help you with hands-on care. So if you need help bathing or dressing, anything like that, they also help with all of those activities. So some agencies, like I said, can only do the companion part, and then some can do both.
Okay.
And our policy at Bayshore is that we only employ licensed professionals, so certified nursing assistants and home health aides. But if you were to need just companion service, we would send out a licensed person to do that as well.
So everybody that works for you is licensed. Right, I gotcha.
So you'll just want to ask that too.
Right, because I would think that's a protection mechanism, because if they're not licensed, then
and you got
a problem, right?
Exactly.
Okay, wow. Now, what other services do you offer?
At Bayshore, we also offer a medication management service, which is really helpful to a lot of people, because a lot of seniors are on between 8 to 15 medications, which can be a lot. You're 85 and you don't know which ones to take at breakfast, which ones you're supposed to take on a full or empty stomach. It can get really confusing. So with this service, a nurse will come out on a weekly basis. She'll fill out a huge pill box for you that says AM, noon, evening, bed. Fill out all the medications in those little boxes for you, as well as reorder any medications, and then also verify all of the prescriptions with every physician involved. A lot of seniors, they see specialists and then they have their primary care, so they might have a lot of exactly. They might have a lot of prescribing physicians, and they might not all talk to each other and communicate, what's being prescribed. So it's another kind of way to make sure everything is going to mix together well.
So this person that's coming to do the home health care, that's helping with the prescriptions and all of the medical, and they have multiple and I know people like this. They have multiple doctors. I've seen the chart on the wall if they're trying to do it themselves.
Yes.
But if someone comes to the home to help them do this, how do you track that? Is it done on a computer? In other words, how do you keep track of 8 to 15 medications, all the doctors?
Yes.
And is that person making the phone call, setting up the appointments? Because to me, that just sounds overwhelming.
Yes.
To try and do that. Yes.
So for us, it would be the nurse. She is the one that will go in the home and make that initial. We have kind of a master chart for every single client that says, what prescriptions they're on, how many, what time per day. And then she puts that in the box, like I said. And then the caregiver is, who's there, say 8 hours a day. When she gets there in the morning, she says, okay, Mrs. Jones, it's time for you to take your medicine. So she reminds her when it's time to take them so that they're given at the correct intervals. And then the nurse also kind of gives that information, a feedback loop back to the office. So then it's also in our computer system for every client. So say there was a question, this happens. There's a question. Oh, usually there's 5 pills in this spot, but today there's only 4. So the caregiver will go call the office and say, I noticed it looks like one of the pills is missing. Is it supposed to be like that? Or, what's going on? And the office can look that up right then and answer that question for them and, let them know, oh, yep, the doctor actually has discontinued that one as of today. So
you're double checking, and that way you have something in the computer that says that, because if I'm the child of that parent, say, I would want to know, if I wanted to see records, is that something that's provided to me if I have permission to be able to view all of those documents so I can say, hey, it looks like it's going well, or nope, something's going wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have the permission, you can see anything you'd like to. So
Okay, good. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back. Stay with us.
But it's been no bed of roses, no pleasure cruise.
Arg, matey. When it's time for lunch, when it's time for dinner, when the show's over, when the day's over, when it's time to chill, where do we go? Over to Naughty Nancy's Food Shack and Crow's Nest Pub. It's literally in our backyard, right in back of the WTAN studios at 700 Eldridge Street, just north of downtown Clearwater. Just look for the broadcast tower. Nancy's food and atmosphere get rave reviews. The laid-back patio is a great place to hang out, dine, and listen to live music at night. And Nancy's one of the friendliest proprietors in town. And now, Nancy is serving Sunday Jazz Brunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Brunch served with Eggs Benedict, crepes, waffles, lox and bagels, shrimp, oysters, and a build-your-own omelet. That's all at Naughty Nancy's Food Shack and Crow's Nest Pub, 700 Eldridge Street in Clearwater. That's right where Eldridge crosses the Pinellas Trail between Myrtle and Fort Harrison. Call 446-3717. 446-3717. You're listening to the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Have you ever had the desire to do something adventurous, exciting, fun, delicious, or suspicious, and don't know why or when it hit you? Well, now you'll know. 441-3311. Yes, you'll hear it right here on your own local radio station. 1340 AM. You can shout your message to the world. Hear it on its highest note. Get people to come to your business, enjoy your services or goods, and the good news is it's affordable. Call 441-3311 for the fun of it. That's 727-441-3311. And, oh, by the way, my name is Lola.
I consider it a challenge before the whole human race, and I ain't gonna lose.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk Radio Show. I'm here with Breque Bonner from Bayshore Home Care, and we've been talking about home health care options. And, what do you do if you have a loved one that maybe needs home health care? We've been covering some of these assorted topics, but in this segment, I want to start with, let's talk a little bit about, we were talking about skilled nursing visits, right? You can have a skilled nurse come out and do a wellness assessment and a post-hospital assessment. But let's talk about case management a little bit more, and how do you monitor the well-being of that client? How do you tie it all together?
Perfect. So case management, kind of branching off from what we were talking about before with the medications, as we just got into that one service and it seems overwhelming, just that one thing.
Right.
So, and that's only like one facet of, one part of the client's life. So case management kind of takes on those more, needy cases, the people that need a little bit more attention and help, and they might be a little bit more complex. So for this, we would send out a nurse, maybe once a week or as often as the family wanted. And she is going to look for other things that, the client needs, other services. So do they have all of the medical equipment in the home that they need, like, grab bars, or do they need a walker or a hospital bed? Anything like that too, and facilitating all of that, because that can be confusing. So the nurse she'll go in and identify a need for another piece of equipment and then run with it, until the equipment has been delivered and everything is all set up. So that's one part of case management. And then we will also, if a client wants or a family member wants, we can accompany our clients to the physician's office. That's kind of one place that is like a black hole of information where, mom's like, oh yeah, I have a doctor's appointment at 3. You call her at 4:30, say, oh, how did it go? What did the doctor say? Oh, he said, everything's fine. It's good, And
you don't get any information.
That's probably not the whole story if it's any of it. So a lot of times sending a nurse, will help you, especially if you're an out-of-town family member, get a full story of what really happened. Well, the doctor actually said, we need to do this, this, and this, or this could happen. Kind of just gives you a little bit more of a real story.
Well, that's because, your parents don't want you to worry even when they're older. And that way, I know with my family, they don't, and fortunately most of them are healthy, but they don't want to tell you what's going on because they don't want to worry you.
Exactly.
So, I'll get the phone call the day before someone has heart surgery. Oh, I'm having heart surgery, in another state.
Right.
And, don't worry. Come in 2 weeks when I'm out of the hospital or whatever it is. They don't want you to worry.
Yeah.
But I think having somebody there with that person it kind of gives that person maybe a little extra comfort level, as well as being able to go back to the family member.
Yeah, and having that nurse and that expert come in and, letting your mom or your dad kind of have a friend who has that expertise gives them a little bit more of a level of comfort. They, oh, this person, I can trust them. I can tell them my concerns, where, like you say, seniors usually don't want to concern their families, about problems they might be having, or if they're fearful of something. Even like driving is something that seniors, a lot of times they become afraid to do, but they don't want to tell their family that because it feels like it's the first, way they're losing their independence. So they're more apt to kind of tell an outsider and someone they see as a professional or an expert those kind of concerns. So helps to cut that stuff.
Well, let's go back to the driving. I can think of an instance 20 years ago when my grandfather was still alive, actually in Florida. I came to visit him in Fort Lauderdale, and he I think he was having dialysis and he was driving. And I remember my father saying, don't let him drive, because what was happening was he was getting into a series of accidents. And we're talking to go to the medical facility was only maybe 10 minutes away. So, of course, my job for the week that I was down, we were taking turns, was to drive him back and forth so that he wouldn't. And I remember at one point he wanted to go somewhere and he looked at me and he said, I'm 80 years old and I'm driving myself. And, the guilt, I was like, what am I going to do? So, he wasn't a terrible driver, but I didn't know what to do at that point. I was much younger.
Right.
What do you tell people? It's got to be a common problem. And can you stop them from driving?
One thing that you can definitely do is go to the DMV. You can ask them, can we do a safety assessment here? Can we check things out? And kind of like ask for a driver's test for your senior.
I didn't even know you could request that. So you request that. So what now that person that family member has to take the driving test and get in the car and do the whole thing all over again. Yeah.
Or you can even call in, there's lots of professional like driving coaches. So people who might kind of do like driver's ed for teens. They can kind of do it for seniors too. Have that professional driving coach come out, ask them, have your senior drive around with them, and they can kind of break the news to them that like, this might not really be a good idea that you're driving, or, I'm noticing there's a lot of dents around your car, right. They
may not realize they're at the supermarket and they back up into, one of the concrete things and they're not realizing exactly what's going on. Or maybe they are and they just say, hey, I'm not going to give up. So talk to me about the independence of that person. How do you, and I know you're not a psychologist, but from a psychological standpoint, do you find that most of those people, it's difficult for them to give up the car or to give up being completely independent? Does it vary a lot? Maybe share some stories.
Yeah, it does vary a lot because it is kind of one of the first signs that is like, oh, I might kind of be, losing some independence here. So that is driving is a really big hurdle to overcome. One way that for one of our clients, one thing that we do is drive behind them. Anywhere they go, they are allowed to, husband and wife, they want to go out to dinner together. And so they get in their car and head down the road. We all know where we're going. And the caregiver gets in the car right behind them and follows them the entire way.
They should have a camera while they're doing that, but okay.
So that's one way that, we're able to kind of preserve some independence, but still make sure that they are safe and, there is an eye kept on them and that kind of thing. So kind of lets them keep a little bit of normalcy while, having some protection all at the same time.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, any stories that you want to share? Maybe some success stories of situations, or maybe I don't know if you've ever had, a client that maybe was with another home care service where it didn't work out and your company sent somebody in and took it over. But maybe share some stories that went from negative to positive, because that's what we're about on the show.
Yeah, sure. We have actually a number of clients that have come, from other home care agencies. Sometimes it's just not really the right fit. And sometimes, you don't really love your caregiver, or they don't, you don't really click or anything like that. So we have one client that we've had for years and years, and she has, for the most part, we always try and keep, one main caregiver, depending on how many hours of service you want, and then kind of a list of backups. We're okay. If Jamie is sick, you can send Susie, or, things like that.
People are familiar with most of the time.
Lots of familiar people. So we have, this one really great match that we have made, and they've been together for years. And this particular patient, she had a stroke, so she was very debilitated, not really able to do much for herself. But over the years, she's kind of built up strength. So her and her caregiver, they love to do art together. So they come into the office about once a week and bring in some new art pieces for us all to see, and they're displayed everywhere. And then they can also bake together. So that's something that they really like to do, that she wasn't able to do before. But now,
She can do it with
they've
the
made
extra
that
hands.
bond. Yeah, she has the help. She's always loved baking. And now she's able to do it, with someone that she cares about.
That's a great story. So a lot of times it sounds like the caregivers actually may become friends with the person that they're taking care of, right?
Absolutely. And, our caregivers, we take a lot of time to screen and make sure that they are a good fit and they have that compassionate heart and, they're in it for the right reasons and they care about caring, So we always try and hire caregivers that have that kind of spark and that edge that, they are a caregiver because they want to be. And a lot of times they have had an experience in the past that has led them to this career. So, their own loved one needed home health care or, they've had an experience with hospice or something like that. There's usually always a story behind that brings them to where they are. And, those are the great caregivers.
Now, do you know any of those stories?
I do. I just know of one off the top of my head where we had a caregiver come to us and she had had a completely different career, in a totally different field. And then her father became ill and he, needed home health care and needed hospice and, all of those sorts of things. And she noticed what a difference all of those people made in her life. And she became great friends with the caregivers for her father. And, saw how much they improved his quality of life, just having someone around him all the time. She was still out working and, providing for her family, but she knew that they were back at home and, they were having as good a time, as they could. And, he was enjoying life. And so after her father passed, she, changed careers completely, came to Bayshore and was like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Wow.
This is the kind of, comfort that I want to provide people. I want them to, feel like I'm caring for their family member as if I would my own.
Right. So. That's a great story. Because and especially I think like once if the caregiver does bond with the person, like you were talking about the story, they were baking and doing art together. That's got to make the person that's getting the help just feel so much more relaxed, I would think. And then if you're relaxed and happy, you tend to be healthier. It's funny, just real quick, I'll tell you, when I get nervous, in what I do is I smile. And as silly as that sounds, it's just an old trick where when you smile, it changes your whole perception of things. And I'm thinking for someone who's sick, how much do they smile? Because they must be worried about, what's going on. Who wants to think about getting older or having all these medical issues? So, that's a great idea. And you were talking about, if you're living like in an assisted or independent, well, actually an assisted living. I've been in some of those facilities and I see sometimes they have so many activities. Yeah. I go, wow. I would love to live here because they get to do all these fun things. And when you were talking about, your choice, well, someone who is social is going to want to live probably in a facility where there's a lot of action. Right. But somebody who maybe is not
more shy, reserved,
they're going to want to be in a smaller type of situation.
Yes.
But all right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a bit more, and we're also going to talk about warnings and tips of things you should know. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
I thank you all, but it's been no bed of roses, no pleasure cruise.
Imus in the morning.
Please welcome now to the program the sportscaster Mike Breque. Good morning, Mr. Breque.
Good morning, I-Man. So good to be on your popular morning show once again. How's your staff? I love that talented crew of yours. How's Charles? He's a pro,
Charles has not been here for over a year, Mike.
Oh, that's a shame. How's Larry Kenny? Love his impressions. Is there any voice he can't do, I-Man?
Larry hasn't been here for about 3 years.
Oh, such a shame. I can't get to work in the morning without Roz Frank.
Roz hasn't been here, Mike, in about 15 years.
Oh, shame. Hey, I-Man, how's your health? Cancer. You can't breathe. Impotent. You're a mess, I-Man. You're a mess. Do you still drink, I-Man?
No, I don't, Mike.
Oh, that's a shame. You were always such fun when you were drunk. Hey, I-Man.
Yes, Mike.
Is your wife still in charge of your health treatments?
Yes, she is.
Oh, that's a good idea. The woman who inherits millions making life and death decisions. I'm sure she loves you for who you are.
Catch Imus in the morning right here.
Hi, I'm Katrina Madewell, host of Tampa Home Talk. I'm going to give you market-appropriate, timely information regarding homeownership matters because we want to make your everyday life better. Wherever you are in life, it's our mission to bring you good advice so you can maintain good credit, live within your means, and build wealth. My team and I are passionate about it. Love where you live, or I'll fix it. Tampa Home Talk on WTAN every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m.
I consider it a challenge before the whole human race, and I ain't gonna lose.
And welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. We're talking about home care and what you should know and when are the right times. And I'm here with Breque Bonner from Bayshore. And I want to ask you to share some more stories because, you know, a lot of people listening may find themselves in a situation or are already in that situation with a family member. But, you know, I look at like my family, for example, my parents are in their 70s. So, you know, where I can see one parent is already headed down the road where they probably need the health care. I have another one who is not there yet and actually is in pretty good shape. But I think that maybe people wait until that last minute, get into that panic of, oh my gosh, what do I do? Rather than prepare, you know, as we talked about earlier with the elder care attorney and so forth. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's a shame, but a lot of times people wait until a moment of crisis to intervene and to do something and to make changes rather than that first kind of moment of concern when they first get an inkling that something happens, which kind of it can make the senior a little bit, you know, worse off in the end, you know, waiting to get help for so long. And kind of like you said with your own family member, we have had multiple clients where, you know, we have a wife who's caring for her husband. She is in relatively good health. And then, you know, something all of a sudden kind of pushes her over the edge and all of a sudden she begins to decline. Now what? Because she was the primary caregiver for her husband.
Right.
So that happens, you know, all of the time. And that's kind of why it's important to, if you can, you know, try and think ahead and, you know, be prepared and get ready for these things that are normal parts of aging. Like this is just normal parts of life and this is the next step, you know, kind of like you prepare to go off to college, you prepare for your career, you know, you start planning for your retirement, how far in advance from when you retire, you know, this is kind of just like the next step and it's normal.
Right. And I think you have to think about that. And I just want to emphasize if your parents or family members are in that situation, you definitely have to see an elder care attorney and you have to have, or that parent, that family member. Geez, I don't know what the law is, but I think you have to have something in place a lot of times a couple of years before things happen, or that family member, if they have a lot of money, they may lose assets and things like that to Medicare is my understanding, because I'm not a lawyer, that's my disclaimer, but you have to be prepared for that rather than wait till the last minute. And now you're in a panic and you have to take off time from work for yourself to try and fix the problem that you didn't deal with when you were approaching that problem. And a lot of that is probably guilt from that parent, you know, now being the one that needs help. So tell me, you know, give me a few more stories, maybe give me some happy stories of situations. We like happy here too.
Perfect. I love happy too. Well, I'll tell you one story recently. We were caring for a gentleman. At first we were caring for him in his own home. And then it came to a point where he needed to move into a facility. You know, just kind of the care he required. And he didn't want to have 24-hour care in his home. So he decided to move. But we still came and cared for him there in the facility. That's something we can do. And of course, he has his, you know, same favorite little posse of caregivers, you know, like they all do. And so he actually turned 100 this past year. Yeah. So we had a big blowout party for him.
I got to hit the bell for 100. That's great.
Bell. Not 100 times. Yeah, so we had, you know, a big party for him. His family came down from up north, you know, a big blowout. The news was there. So that's one of the, you know, more fun things that we get to do, celebrate 100th birthdays. We also had another client this year who turned 100 who was a past nurse. So we had some nurses go out with her and have a little nursing party and dress up. So those are the fun things that we, you know, kind of get to do. So,
wow, that's good. Now, maybe, and let's do the reverse now. Let's share some of the, maybe the sadder stories of situations that didn't work out for whatever reason.
Well, I can tell you one time I was going into another part of my job is to visit hospitals and rehab facilities, you know, where seniors are getting ready to be discharged back home. And I had a potential client I was meeting with, and she was just frightened to death of having anyone come into her home and care for her because, you know, she used to live up north and she had a really bad experience with some care that she received there. People had stolen from her. She lost a lot of, you know, jewelry, valuables, all of that kind of thing. So she was just very put off by allowing anyone else to come into her home. So that's kind of one of the more sad things that happens. So that's why another reason why it's so important to know on the front end, like ask all of your questions out front, know about the company's licensure, know how long they've been around, like all of those sorts of things that kind of will prevent you from making that mistake and, feeling like you got burned in the first place, being aware, knowing, ask the company, what happens if, you send a caregiver to my house and they steal my stuff, then what? So that's, kind of one of the sad things that is just like awful, but seniors get taken advantage of so much too. So they're already frightened of that.
Yeah, especially here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I know here, I think if you're 60 or older, there are laws that are supposed to protect you. The problem is, how do you get enforcement of those laws? And, it's funny being, a consumer advocate, so to speak, and trying to help people. Sometimes people come to me and say, well, what do I do if this and if this? There's a lot of fraudulent things going on. You see it online, right? When you get emails, send me money, PayPal, wire this, wire that. And I try to tell people, if it's too good to be true, it is. If you don't know who it's from, hit delete. It could come in the mail and look like an official document, and it's not. And I think that's where the seniors really, need the help, need somebody who is an advocate to be able to help them. Let's talk a bit about the warning signs of disreputable home care services like the one that you mentioned. How do I compare? Let's say I have a family member and I want to check out, maybe 3 or 4 companies. Is there a rating system? Can I go to certain agencies? How do I look them up?
Yes. So depending on their level of licensure, which is like keyword here is what kind of licensure do you have? This is what you need to know. Depending on their level of licensure, they are going to be regulated by ACA, the Agency for Healthcare Administration. So you can go to ACA's website, which is aca.myflorida.com, and you can search there any fully licensed home health agency or any nurse registry, which I didn't really touch. I'll touch on the difference there.
Okay.
Fully licensed home health agency, they can provide hands-on care in the home. All of their caregivers, which are the CNAs and the home health aides, and then anyone else that they have, that's their own employees. So they carry the workers' comp and the liability insurance on those employees. So you are covered. Like that is like the golden ticket to know that you are in a safe place.
Okay.
And then the other level of licensure, which is still, regulated by ACA, is called a nurse registry. And these people, they can also perform hands-on care in the home. They have certified nursing assistants and home health aides as well. The difference is that they use subcontractors. So they're not their own employees. So they don't, require that workers' comp and the liability insurance. So if something were to happen in the home, your caregiver slips and falls on your front porch, cuts their finger, making you a sandwich, anything like that, that would go back on the homeowner's insurance. And the agency's not responsible because it's a subcontractor. And then there's also like tax things in there as well, where, you'll need to report that you have a subcontractor and that kind of thing in your home. The nurse registry isn't responsible for taking out those, taxes from the workers'
So basically
pay.
What you're saying is that the good way is to have the home caregivers as employees, where they're completely covered and there's liability insurance.
Right.
But if they're not and they're independent contractors or subcontractors, as you call them, then it's separate. So there might be different legal implications. If somebody gets injured, now it's stuck on the homeowner as opposed to with the company that has the employees. Okay, so that's complicated.
It's complicated.
For people to know.
Yes, but you can go to that website I listed, aca.myflorida.com, and you can look up any one of these agencies that you're considering working. So you can type in their name and it will pop up. All of these agencies are subject to a yearly what's called survey. So where the regulatory bodies come in, review, all of their files, look for any what's called like deficiencies. So like any kind of dings in the care that they give or their processes. Okay. And all of those are recorded and you have access to them.
Okay, so if somebody has a bad experience with a home health caregiver, do they go to this ACA site to file a complaint? Like, can they file a complaint online? Is that how they're getting their information? Do you know if that's a way?
I'm not 100% sure if you can go online, but you can contact DACA with a complaint.
Okay.
But kind of the more traditional route would be to, even with, an independent caregiver that you have, a private caregiver that's not through any sort of agency. It's through DCF, Department of Children and Families. They are usually the first ones that come out and launch an investigation. And then if, it needs to be escalated, they are the ones who escalate it.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about that. DCF, for some reason, that's Division of Children and Family Services, correct?
Family. Mm-hmm.
Now, I always thought children and family, but it never struck me as
elder.
Yeah, never. So how does that work? What do they do and what do they cover?
Mm-hmm. They will come out to, a home, a facility, anywhere that there is a complaint or kind of, an idea of, neglect or anything like that coming out. And they kind of, do the same thing as you would with a child, do an investigation and see what's happening. And kind of this, it's funny because shopping for home care is a lot like shopping for a babysitter or like daycare for your kid. All of the same things that you look for in a daycare, you can want to look for in a home care as well. The DCF will come out and, do the investigation.
All right. Now, give us some tips for finding reliable home care. I saw you had a tips section on your website, listed some good tips.
Yeah.
So can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. Some of those tips for finding a good agency would be asking how long they've been providing care in the area. Also, of course, go back, ask about that licensure, ask about their credentials, things like that, about their insurance, do you have it? And then for the caregivers, you want to ask, do you perform those level 2 background checks? Do you interview your caregivers? Do you provide any extra training? A lot of times seniors, they need help, beyond just the average. So they might need a Hoyer lift in the home or a Sarah lift in the home. Do you provide training so that your caregivers know how to use these things in my home? All of those, especially if your loved one has a specific disease or medical equipment you already know they use, ask, are your caregivers familiar with using this? And, do they have training or what happens here? So those are some ways. Then you'll also want to ask, how are emergencies handled after hours? Do I call and the phone just rings and rings? Do I call and leave a message? Do I have to wait till the next business day? Is there an answering service? Or do you have one of your own employees on call 24 hours a day? That's the case with Bayshore. We have a Bayshore employee on call 24 hours a day answering the phone. Unfortunately, a lot of emergencies don't happen on normal business hours.
No, they happen
8 to 5.
Right, they happen after hours.
Saturday
when you can't
night at
get
11.
Anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's, it's really important to just know what to expect from the agency in that event because chances are, something will happen after hours. So.
Well, it sounds almost like you need to make up a checklist. All the things that you were talking about would be a great checklist to put together for people, and just a thought for you.
Yes.
When they're shopping around and say, do you do this, and this? Because I would have no idea based upon what you're telling me.
Yes.
I know nothing compared to what you're telling me. So it's kind of an eye-opener, which is the point of this entire show.
Yeah.
Any additional tips before we close today?
I think that's really it. I will just point out that on our website at BayshoreHomeCare.com, we have a 2-minute tip library that I have created.
Okay.
And they are just videos of me giving information about all the things you need to know about home care. So a lot of the stuff that we talked about here, some stuff that we didn't. And my most recent post was the questions you need to ask when you're considering a home care agency. So I have the whole list, in a blog post there too.
That's perfect. See, it's mental telepathy. That's perfect. That's what you need. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. Give out your contact information. Give out your website again. Give out your phone number in case somebody wants to, to contact you.
Yep. Our website is BayshoreHomeCare.com. You can also check out our blog, BayshoreHomeCare.com/blog, or find us on social media. Just search Bayshore Home Care on Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. Or you can call and talk to our customer service manager, Pam. She's been with us 28 years, and her direct line is 800-335-2150.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And join us every Thursday night at 11 p.m. for a new half-empty, half-full talk radio show. Learn something new every week and get smarter faster. Be safe.
From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.